Je rappelle que Marcelo est directeur du département économie et réduction de la pauvreté, région Afrique, Banque mondiale.
Well, thank you very much to Leadership Africa and to all of you for the opportunity of being here today to present the World Bank strategy, I should say the new World Bank strategy for Africa. Now, I was given 15 minutes, and I will be the one that stays to 15 minutes to present more than 1 year of work that the bank has done, not just in the bank, but more importantly, consulting the actors in Africa, all the way from the high-level leadership down, I would say, from the village level. We literally travel Africa getting the views from the clients of the bank, especially the poor, for more than 1 year. So I have 15 minutes to tell you what that strategy looks like. And I also was told not to use a PowerPoint. Okay, so it's time and it's show that we're going to cut back a little bit on. Let me say from the start, we're doing here today, and the message I want you to take is, we see 3 big changes in the reality of Africa that forces almost the bank to change its strategy towards this new reality, and then we necessarily have to adjust our instruments to implement the strategy, simply because the world is different. Africa is different. So let me go quickly, about 5 minutes on each of these 3/3 of the presentation. And the first third is how Africa is changing and why this change forces the bank to have a new strategy for the continent. I would say it's changing for many reasons, but there is a core of 3 reasons that are obviously unavoidable, too conspicuous to ignore, and that are changing the nature of what Africa is. The first is Africa begins to have economic success, begins to experience fast and sustained, and this second adjective is important, sustained growth. The continent has been growing at more than 5% for more than 5 years. And for people like me that have been in this profession for decades, the 5 times 5, more than 5% for more than 5 years, is more or less the threshold where you begin to pay attention to serious poverty reduction. This is when things begin to happen. And Africa has already gone through it. But more interestingly, Africa has gone through the 5 times 5 while dealing with a global crisis of unprecedented proportions. The global crisis has slowed down Africa, but did not send it into reverse. It did not cause, almost in any country, a recession. It caused a slowdown, which tells you that there must be something else beyond commodity prices driving the success of Africa. And we begin to feel that what is behind this is true institutional change, slow, too slow to be even perceptible for populations. Clearly not something we want to be happy about yet, but the quality of policy making that institutions do is beginning to improve. And you can see that during the crisis, how Africa did not do certain things. For example, did not go into a borrowing spree. Yeah, you may say, well, because the donors wouldn't allow you to do it. Well, I'm not sure. At the same time, it did fiscal stimulus, meaning it spent more on average to compensate the contraction that the crisis was causing, but it did it within parameters of reasonability. It was pretty reasonable what it did. It did not go for money printing like in the good old times when we just print money to solve all problems. Even the subsidies that Africa put forward were fairly well targeted. And finally, the continent did not close down. It stayed open for business. So there are these indications that growth may be here for good, maybe here to stay, because it's not just driven by commodity prices, and those will stay high until at least 2015, but also because there seems to be better quality in policy making. Now, at the same time, the second reality, parallel to this new growth and sustained growth, parallel to the 5x5, is the presence of new actors in Africa. The appearance on the stage of new actors. Obviously, we are thinking about China, and China is one of them, but also think about India and think about Brazil. Now, they were here before. Brazil has been here for more than 10 or 15 years, particularly in the Luso-speaking, the Portuguese-speaking part of Africa. But there is a new role that they are playing. And it's not just a role of lenders, it's also a role of investors. Now you may say they are investing in extractive industries, and that's probably true. The majority, that's what it is. But you begin to see also other type of investments, for example, construction. Remember, China is supposed to share, to leave behind 85 million jobs, low-skilled jobs, in the next 10 years. 85 million jobs will come out of China. China doesn't want them anymore. So some of that will come to Africa as well. And then other actors that were traditional actors, particularly the post-colonialist donors, are beginning to withdraw. Not physically, the embassies are still here and their people are still here. Even their money is mostly here, not completely, but it's mostly here. But the role, the force, the presence, even the relevance is beginning to slowly, gradually diminish. And that includes also the World Bank. And I will come back to that. And the third reality that we have today that we didn't have before in Africa, remember I told you about growth being sustained, I told you about the new actors and the old actors. The third reality is democracy. Okay? And it's not just the democracy of voting. You've been voting for quite a while, in most places. It's the democracy of people in the street, that people that are connected. It's a democracy of agglomeration. When people connect, they are more than the sum of the parts. And you may say the connection is due to new information technologies, the cell phone culture. Maybe it's that. Or maybe it's a new generation that does not quite respect the old traditions and authorities and history. They just take them, value them, but they don't live by it. They live by different parameters. So the third change is democracy, but behind democracy, I would say, is generational change. Africa is getting younger in more than the demographic sense. So keep those three giant realities. There are many more changes that happen in Africa over the last 5 years, but those three are the big ones: the economy, the geopolitics, and the culture and the people, the democracy, the politics. So 5 minutes for those three big realities that have changed. Obviously, with that kind of reality change, you don't want the World Bank of 20 years ago. The World Bank pre-Cold War, the World Bank of, we'll build a big dam or we'll build a big road and we leave. You don't want that World Bank monopolist, the only lender to developing countries 30 years ago. You certainly don't want one World Bank that is omniscient, meaning it knows everything. You want a World Bank that mostly trades in knowledge, but the knowledge today is in the internet, so the World Bank doesn't have the knowledge anymore physically with it, in reports, or in books, or in people. Knowledge is a network today, it's everywhere. And finally, you don't want a World Bank that is authoritarian. Comes into a country and says, we do this project this way, or we don't do it. And let me tell you, we are all very young, but when I came to the bank, before most of you were born, that was the bank I met. And that's 22 years ago. Authoritarian bank. I would walk into a place and I could hear the bank say the project will be done this way or not being done at all. Today the bank will not approach a project if the beneficiaries don't speak up first. I spent Tuesday visiting rural villages in Ties, actually outside a small community called Noto. here in Senegal, because they are my first client. I will see the government today, 2 days later. The bank has changed. So you don't want to have the same old bank, therefore you don't want to have the same strategy for Africa. So we decided to rethink our strategy in Africa, and we came up, and this is the second third of the presentation, we came up with 3, not new, but I would say different objectives for us, strategic objectives, okay? The first objective is to make this growth that I was speaking to you about, not only faster. Why is Africa not growing at 8%? Why are we not speaking about the African miracle yet? We're just speaking about Africa's growing, but not miracle. So how do we make this growth faster? Certainly, sustain, meaning every year, but more importantly, and this is the objective, how do we make growth create jobs? How do we make sure that out of growth comes jobs? Jobs is the motto of the new strategy. Employment. And the beauty of it is that we came up with this idea, which we didn't really, because we consulted with all of you, but the idea was put on paper before the Arab Spring, before we all worry about jobs. Because we say, if we don't have jobs, people will go out in the street and do bad things. Okay? Actually, good things, I should say. So job creation is the first objective of this new strategy. The second objective is to protect those jobs, to make sure that they are not here today and disappear tomorrow. That's what we call vulnerability. We want to do everything we can to reduce vulnerabilities. And of course, there are the economic vulnerabilities. Let's make sure that we don't overborrow. Let's make sure that we don't print too much money, that we don't bust the budget deficit, in order to have a macroeconomic framework that will support the jobs and the creation of jobs. First vulnerability, the macro vulnerability. But we want to go beyond that. We are looking at physical vulnerability. Soon we'll begin to face in this continent the patent, the very obvious impact of climate change. It will be a physical vulnerability. We'll have problems in cities that lay low, floods, we'll have droughts in the middle of the continent. We'll have all kind of natural wealth disappearing in front of our own eyes. And when I say soon, we are talking about 30 years, we're not talking more than that. So, if you think about it, the jobs need to be supported not just by economic policy, but also by avoiding physical vulnerabilities. Another physical vulnerability is violence. There is no job creation where people shoot each other. Okay? And I've been in countries where people shoot each other. I've been everywhere in the world, and I can tell you I've never seen a country that is in the middle of serious violence and creates jobs at the same time. So how do we work the new World Bank into the fabric of society so the bank can be one contributor towards peace? So those two objectives, very clear, jobs and vulnerabilities. And the third objective, the one that supports it all, what we call the foundation and platform, just to make it sound very important, is governance. We don't think either the jobs or the vulnerability reduction will happen by magic, and certainly not by dictamen, by mandate of the World Bank. It will happen if you have local leaders implementing the policies, the programs, and the projects that make the jobs and the vulnerability protection happen. Now, that part, that objective, the governance, to me is the toughest of the three. Because for the first two, we more or less know what to do. For governance, it's a very slow process.